If you are here, let me know if you can hear me. I'm just going to get everything popped up here to make sure that we've got everything rocking and rolling. If you have any questions today, the base of today's live stream is going to be, well, first of all, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I see we've got people on. Can you hear me? Let's see. Steven just joined. If you can hear me, let me know. Can hear you, but can't stay. That's all right, Melissa. These will always be saved, but thank you for stopping in. A Vegan Goodness. A couple people on YouTube. One VA Oracle on here. Yes, you can hear me. All right. Hey, Mary, good to see you on here on today's live stream. But today we are going to be talking about gardening, but we can also talk about other things if you have them that you'd like to talk about. But the base today is going to be on gardening. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. But I just want to give a little bit of an overview, a little bit of a background on how I started gardening, how I got into it, and then what I've been doing with gardening and what pertains to gardening and how I've been helping some others as well, and my future plans for gardening. So let's go ahead and get started. If this is your first time tuning into a video, I am Plant-Based Gabriel. I eat a whole food plant-based vegan diet. I used that diet to lose 100 pounds after breaking my back and ending my football career at the University of Nebraska. That's a story for another time. I've told it before, and I'm sure I'll tell it again. If you'd like to know more information about that, you can find it on some other videos. Melissa joined in. Great. And so, hey, Eddie Money. And so, yeah, so that's my background. But how did I start gardening? Some of you may know this, but I now have a 1-acre farm where we grow vegetables using vegan and organic practices. Everybody thinks, and it's true, produce is vegan. If you go to the store and buy a cucumber or a tomato, it's vegan. But unfortunately, pretty much all non-conventionally grown. So conventional meaning that they're spraying it with herbicides and pesticides and salt-based chemical fertilizers, which are horrible for soil. So we don't recommend growing in conventional ways. But even if you're buying organic foods, fruits, vegetables, there's a good chance that they were using something like a bone meal, blood meal, feather meal, and manures from confined animal feeding operations, CAFOs, whatever. And again, those are vegan foods. I'm not telling you not to eat your fruits and vegetables, but I'm saying if you are growing, if you're someone and you're growing, hey, everybody tuning in, thank you for coming in. If you have any questions about gardening, about weight loss, about anything, make sure you ask it, and I'll make sure that I will make sure to answer it. If we're growing ourselves, I believe firmly that as a ethical vegan, but as also someone who wants the healthiest whole food plant foods that I can grow myself, I want to be doing it in the best way possible. And that is through vegan and organic farming and growing. So we use things like a vegetable-based compost to grow our vegetables. We follow no-till or minimal tillage practices here on the farm. And we're always learning. We're always educating. I'm always educating myself on different practices. And so just trying to do what's best for the land, for the vegetables, and for the people that are eating them, which is very important because it's myself and Dr. Miller that are eating them. But let's go back to how I got started gardening. Really, it was kind of a small-scale gardening when it got started. And that was back when I was still a student at the University of Nebraska. Some of you know this. And Taylor, I'll get to that question in just a second. Make sure if you guys have any questions, put them in the comment section, and we'll get to answering them. But I was a student at the University of Nebraska. I was married at the time to my current wife and my only wife, Dr. Miller. And I had grown up, this was, I think, my sophomore year. I had never grown anything. I mean, we didn't grow up. I grew up in a semi-ag area, but my family never grew anything. My mom's mom and dad had a little garden in their yard. They still do, but I didn't ever partake in it. And I didn't get my hands dirty. I don't think I've ever put my hands in soil until then, until I was really in college. And so so Dr. Miller, growing up on a farm, wanted to do some sort of a garden. We were renting a house at that time. And so we couldn't dig into the ground. We couldn't put things like a raised bed in. It just wasn't our home. And so, and we didn't want to add a bunch of infrastructure monetarily because we didn't own the house. And so we decided to try a bucket garden. There was a few resources out there, not a ton. But what we had with our rental house was a huge driveway, very big driveway. And also at the time, I was still running my candied pecan and almond company, Bella Baby Nuts. And we were using a co-packer, a contract packer, someone who was pretty much doing a lot of the producing of the product. We had done all of it ourselves for a long time, but then we went to a co-packer once we were unable to just work in a catering kitchen and make all the product for ourselves. It's just a process of growing a food company like that. But in this big, it was a big bakery is what we were having as our co-packer. And they had all these 5-gallon food grade buckets that they had no use for currently or anymore. They would get in like jams and jellies and different things like that. And so they had them all stacked up. And I just asked him like, hey, can I use some of these? And he said, pack your car or pack, the SUV or whatever, pack this full as you want. We can't get rid of them. We get them in more than we can get rid of them. And so we got as many buckets as we needed. And I think at the start, we got somewhere around like 40, ended up having, I think, 60 or 70 buckets in the driveway that second year. But that first year we had the buckets. I drilled some holes in them, bought some potting mix, and started to get some seeds. So that was the idea. We were going to do this bucket garden. Well, Dr. Miller at the time was still in grad school. And I was still a student, but she got really busy. So we ordered all this seed to start things indoors. And I really wasn't going to partake in it. I was kind of like, I'll help grow it, but this is not my interest. This isn't something I want to do. I'm not a farmer. I don't grow vegetables. I didn't eat vegetables at that time, really. That was back when I was eating the standard American diet, but it's heavily centered around meat, milk, and eggs. And I was 100-pound heavier, but so Dr. Miller orders all these seeds. It probably wasn't that much money. She probably maybe spent $50, but back then you're a college student, you're married, $50 is a lot of money. And I said, and she got really busy and kind of just never got around to starting the seeds. And so it was probably maybe late April when I kind of was like, hey, are we going to do this? What's the deal? And she's just like, I can't, I'm too busy. I'm swamped. It was just a good idea, but it's just not feasible. And I said, whoa, we spent $50 on this, baby. We got to use that. We got to use these things because this not going to waste. And that led to probably the next every free minute, which probably was 100 hours on YouTube, figuring out how do I take this seed, put it in soil, and grow something that I can put outside to create something to eat. That was the simplest form of it. We all start somewhere. And I started when I was taking baby steps. I was like, I've got these seeds. I've never put a seed in the ground before. I've not done any of this. And so that's where I started. That was my sophomore year of college. And that year I ended up, once we started some stuff, she had ordered some lettuce and some peas, which are great. But by the time we had I got rolling with it, it was almost too late to start some of those in the hot, not knowing there was different varieties, things like that. But we got, so then I was like, hey, I'm dedicated to this. I'm going to grow some vegetables. So we got to I was going to Lowe's. We had a Lowe's pretty close by. And I saw they had pepper seeds. I loved hot peppers. I loved the idea of growing hot peppers, not necessarily maybe eating a ton of them. But I got all these hot pepper seeds and I started them, and I probably grew the leggiest, the worst looking seedlings you could ever imagine. But I grew some seedlings and got them out into the buckets. And that for whole first summer, I made a lot of mistakes. I put them in a shaded area, actually. They didn't grow very well. After a month of them not growing, I put them out into the hot heat. And then I made the mistake of not watering them enough, and that burned some of the leaves. Long story short, I ended up having, I think, around 40 buckets with some, and I also grew some tomatoes because Dr. Miller wanted some tomatoes. But I ended up having some tomatoes and peppers, and I didn't have a huge harvest, and the buckets didn't produce a ton. But for as poorly as I treated them, and as ill prepared as I was to start growing things, I grew fruit. I grew some foods, and that was the impetus, the start of my dedication to growing my own vegetables. And I did it on a small scale. I know a lot of you listening to this or watching this may be thinking, Well, Gabriel, it's nice. You have a 1 acre farm where you can grow your vegetables in the ground. And well, I'll say this, for 2-3 years, I did not grow one thing in the ground. I used all containers, and not that first year, but that second year and that third year, I grew a lot of produce, a lot more than more than we were able to eat. And that kind of had to do with the amount of space that we were growing in. So that is where I started. And I'll get back to that second year here in a second. I want to answer some questions. Let's see. Taylor, do you recommend using seeds from packets or from actual fruits and vegetables? Taylor, if you're just getting started, I would recommend using seeds from packets, because let's just use an example of tomatoes. A good chance of the tomatoes that you're using, if you were to take some tomatoes, first of all, let's back up. If you're anybody who's anybody who's a beginning gardener, always use seeds from packets, or buy starts. You can go to Lowe's, you can go to anywhere and buy starts, your local garden center, and buy starts for your plants. That's a great option. And then you can grow them from there. Or you can buy the seed packets and follow the instructions and do that, or look online. I've got different videos on how I start my seeds. But here's the deal. Even the most experienced gardeners, the farmers aren't saving seed is a big task. And if it's something that you're dedicated to and you really want to do it, I would recommend doing it, but not that first or second year of gardening. I think you need to put a lot of time and energy in figuring out how to grow food, how to get things started, how to keep it alive, how to maximize its growth potential. And then if you want to save some seed, you can save some seed. I save a little bit of seed now, but not all my seed. Definitely not all my seed. It is a big task to save seed. It's a great thing to do, but you almost become a full-time seed saver if that's really what you're focusing on. And I'm more into the production side of things. Hope that answers the question. Also, I guess I'll just say this. If you're going to buy seed, there's some great places. You can go to Lowe's. You can go to those places. But migardener.com, that's migardener.com, has 99-cent seeds that are non-GMO. They're great seeds, and they're 99 cents for everything. So you might not get 1,000 seeds in there, but for the average home gardener, you don't need 1,000 tomato seeds in a packet. 12 to 25 is going to be more than enough. So I'd recommend checking out MI Gardener. Be careful, because you could end up spending $125 on 125 varieties. And that's awesome if you do. It's easy to just click. I want that. And then you end up running out of space to grow things. So be careful with that. But I really recommend that. Baker Creek Seeds, their heirloom variety seeds, a great place to go. Johnny's Select Seeds, another great place. Those are a little more expensive. If you're just getting started and you want a good variety of seeds for a low cost, I'd recommend checking out migardener.com. Luke and them over in Michigan do a great job, and I've been a big fan of their work. So I don't get paid for anything from that, but I use their seeds on some things, and I really enjoy it. So check out them. Let's see here. Carla, hi from Brussels, Belgium. Hi, Carla. Thanks for tuning in. It is awesome to see you or have you join in on this Sunday afternoon. Let's see. Kaylee, how much time do you tend your garden every day, week? So that's a really good question. And that's something that I'll brush on, I'm sure, in the future here. But I set up my garden, the farm, to need the minimal amount of work as possible. So I don't have hey Tracy, good to see you. I don't have the goal of being out on the farm, cultivating, tending to weeds, caring for the plants 6-7 hours a day, although you can if you'd like. But I set up different things to allow me to spend less time on it. Now, these might not be as feasible for the beginning gardener, and definitely not feasible if you just have a raised bed or two, because if you have a raised bed or two, even if you don't set anything, you set it up for a complete manual for you to do everything on your own, you're not going to spend that much time on it, and it can be kind of peaceful. But when you have a quarter acre, a half acre in production, I try to minimize the amount of daily work that I have to do on everything. So that means I'm using things like some landscape fabrics that have the holes in them so that I can grow in them, so that I'm not weeding as much. I'm just weeding in between those landscape fabrics, or going in those individual holes and doing some little finesse cultivating in there. Also, I have my wall set on irrigation timer, so it comes on 3 times a day. I don't have to worry about it. I just make sure the spigot's on all the time, and it just turns it on. You can buy some pretty cheap. Oh, let's see here. I think our videos. Is our video back on Facebook. Let's see. Let's see. Percent waited. Sorry. YouTube, 1 second. Looks like our video was interrupted here on Facebook. Let's see. Where are you at, Facebook? All right, our Facebook Live ended there for some reason. Let me see. I'm going to start back up on live here on Facebook here real quick. The live video has ended. Wow, that's a bummer. All right. I apologize about that. We should be back on with Facebook. Let's just make sure. There we are. Oh, and it's backwards. All right. And we're still not there. 1 second. All right, we don't think we're still not. All right. That still did not fix the problem. Oh, we're gonna. All right. Nope, we're gonna get this. One last time. All right. I apologize about that, everyone. We should be good to go here. I'm still trying to kind of work out my live softwares. All right, we're back on Facebook. All right, I apologize about that, everyone. If you're just now tuning in on Facebook, we're live talking about gardening. If you're on YouTube, I'm back here. So what were we talking about? Let's just answer this question here from Home Love. Hi, I don't know how big and gardening you are, but you can make an episode on small balcony windowsill gardening for city dwellers where space is limited. Food plants instead of decor plants indoors. Yes, so those are some great options. Looking at the idea of growing in containers on balconies. So again, if you're just tuning in, I did all my growing my first 2 years and that third year, some of that third year in containers. So I was using 5-gallon buckets we had gotten from a co-packer, a contract packer for one of our food businesses. And so I was using that. That worked awesome. And I'm a big fan of container bucket gardens. You can check out my bucket garden series on YouTube. Actually, I did those videos pretty much before I was doing YouTube. I just was recording them just because I kind of thought it was neat. So if you have any questions, make sure to ask them there. We're talking about gardening and we're talking about farming. We're talking about small scale farming, gardening, any of your questions, vegan gardening. Why do I say vegan produce when I'm talking about vegan gardening? Ask away and I'll make sure to answer it. Okay, so let's go back to, let's start in on the second year of growing. So this, well, you know what? Let's do this. We were talking about how much time I spend. I have things like irrigation setup that's automated here on the farm. I have things like my landscape fabric that I use, that I have holes in it so that I can grow in, that is like a weed free, so I don't have to worry about cultivating and weeding the garden all the time. those are big things. Those are great things that I like to use. And if you're just now jumping in on Facebook, I apologize. Something happened with our stream a second ago. And so, but we're back. We're back. And we're talking about gardening. And so I do things like that. How much time do I spend on it? I spend a couple hours a day, 2 or 3 hours a day out there, but that's on a quarter to a half an acre. If you're growing in a couple raised beds, you're growing in, just a couple beds, you're just growing enough to kind of just supplement some food. You don't have to be out there much, but I would recommend being out there almost every day, because I have fallen into the trap before of saying, oh, it's kind of on autopilot, I don't have to worry about it. And then, 2-3 days go by, and instead of spending 20 minutes a day on taking care of the garden, taking care of the farm, I end up spending 3 hours dealing with what could have been just 1 hour's amount of work. So I'd recommend keeping a thumb on it, making sure that you are just staying up to date on everything that needs to be done in the garden or on the farm. If you have any questions, make sure you ask them. We can talk about anything really, but kind of focusing on gardening, farming today. Home love, I loved that question. And yes, food plants instead of decor plants. That is a great thing. I recommend growing a lot of different, hey, Lindsay just joined, Stephen joined again. But I recommend, like on all my indoor plants, they're mostly edible plants, things like mint, things like water spinach, what else? Buzz buttons, different edible flowers. I really enjoy growing those. I'll grow them outside, and then I like to overwinter some inside in a windowsill, or if you have a lighted area, so that I can just go ahead in the spring, take some cuttings and do some propagation for some new plants, which I have a lot of videos on there. That's how I propagate my mint for what I put out in the farm. So I do some of my flowers, some of my, just some different herbs. Herbs are a great one because you can propagate those pretty easily. And other ones like basil, I'll just start them because they're pretty easy to get rolling. They do take, but if you have them inside, you can keep them. But let's go back to year. So how I got started in it. So year 2, we have the buckets. They're kind of filled with soil. I'd grown some produce, but year 2 is when I decided I'm really going to focus on my seed starting and getting my seedlings to be as strong as possible. And again, it's only my second year ever growing anything, but I spent a lot of time, again, on YouTube, looking up on Google, looking up ways to start things. How do I start peppers? How do I start? I was like, can I start corn inside? Can I start onion? All these different things that I was wanting to start and get going, that I didn't want to just put down in the ground, because you don't necessarily, you think, oh, I don't know if it's going to come up or not. And it's a different techniques, but I really wanted to kind of master the art of starting seed indoors. And so let me grab a drink of water here. Linda, good to have you on. But I ended up getting some more seeds in, and got a little bit of like a grow light area. Now, if you've seen my grow lights, I build my own grow lights using LEDs, but that are very simple. You can just get them on Amazon. They're very cheap. You can grow a lot of plants with them, very powerful. But I got some grow lights, but the ones I was using were just fluorescent bulbs that were not very powerful. And I had them way high up, and I kind of made the same problem the year before, but I've gotten much handier. I will say this, I've gotten much handier as we've been on the farm and as I've just kind of been outside a lot more. But back then, my sophomore, junior year of college, I wasn't necessarily the most handy person to have around. And so, homemade mama, did you ever grow potatoes in a container? I did. I grew sweet potatoes in 5-gallon buckets and had some big harvests with them. I feel like that video never got shared though. I recorded it, but again, I wasn't like on YouTube. I wasn't on Facebook, as in like I wasn't producing videos. I was just kind of keeping things for my own records. And I think I have those videos. That's a good idea. I should publish those because that could be helpful. But yeah, so what I did with sweet potatoes is I took some sweet potatoes. I buy organic because sometimes non-organic sweet potatoes have been sprayed or you don't want them to sprout when you're selling them in the grocery store. But the organic potatoes haven't been sprayed or they haven't put any things on it to stop it from sprouting. And so I got some, just went to like Whole Foods, bought some organic sweet potatoes and put them in little glass or little containers like cups with some toothpicks on each side and let them root out. Now this was under a light. And yeah, I found you have somewhere around 75 to 80% success rate with that, which is good. But they'll send roots down in the water and then they'll shoot sprouts up. And then once those sprouts reach about 6 inches or so, you'll just pull it off and then put that sprout down there into a slip is kind of what it's called. But you put that down into the water and then that will send new roots, and you do that over and over and over again. And then you plant those. So I planted, I think 4 or 5 slips, which are about this big with roots, into the buckets. And by that fall, I don't know if I took a weight on it, but I had to have had 15 pounds of sweet potatoes in a couple buckets. So I was really happy with it. And you can do different things. You can have better soil for potatoes in that instant for those sweet potatoes. But for my purposes, it worked out really good. So yeah, I did grow potatoes in those buckets. I will see. I grew carrots. That's a pretty popular video on my channel, actually, is my carrot bucket garden carrot harvest video, which was pretty neat to see how the carrots did. And I was not very great at growing carrots at the time. I will just mention that. But again, if you're tuning in, make sure you ask any questions you have, and I'll get to answering them. All right, so that second year, my seedlings were a little bit better, and I spent a ton of time. I remember and also my father-in-law at similar time was building a greenhouse that he was going to start growing vegetables in. And I wanted to grow starts for him. I wanted to grow tomatoes and peppers for him and some different things to start for him. And I did. And his things ended up growing awesome. I mean, he had peppers out his ears. He had tomatoes, and they did awesome. And because he came down they came down that year. They came out that year, and I grew the plants for him. They did awesome. And then that might have been my senior year? That might have been my senior year. Yeah, I grew the plants for him. They did really well. And I got them nice and big. My tomatoes were big. My peppers were big. And he took them back. He kind of went through the process, had them in the greenhouse, and they just took off. I, on the other hand, waited to put them out kind of mid-May. And I was so proud of these plants. So, hey, Debbie, good to see you. I was so proud of these plants. And I bring them outside, get them planted, or I hardened them off, I thought. Kind of hardened them off. Hardening off, which just basically means when you grow things indoors, you start seeds indoors. When you bring them outside, it's a much different environment. You've got the sun beating down on them. You've got the wind blowing, which can dry out those the capillaries, and the plants just are under a lot of stress if you were to just take them out. They're out there, even when you harden them off, they're under a lot of stress. But it's very stressful for these plants. And so I took them and hardened them off what I thought in the shade for a couple of days. But I was so eager. I had these awesome plants. The weather was warm. And I ended up taking them and putting them in the buckets. And I have a video out, which doesn't have any views. But it's all about, thank you for those hearts, whoever's doing those. Very kind of you. But I took them out and put them in the buckets. And and it was super hot. I put them out in the wrong time. It's just every mistake you could have made when I was transplanting, I made. And I came out it was either like that late afternoon or the next day. And 95% of my pepper plants were just toast. The leaves had fallen off. The stem was burned. It was, I spent months growing these plants, and they were just ruined. Luckily, I had saved some back that I hadn't planted, like the crappy ones, the ones that you didn't want to plant, but you're like, well, if something happens to one. So I ended up planting the second tier plants, put them out, and they did okay, but I wasn't able to fill as many buckets, so I had to diversify, which was kind of fun, actually. And it made me try different things, like growing some different herbs, some mints, some basils. I did corn in buckets. I've got a video out there where I grew popcorn in 5-gallon buckets. That was fun. But that was a big mistake, and you learn from those mistakes. But here's the deal, and here's where I'd like to encourage you, is a lot of people might have put those plants out. You might have spent all that time, spent money, spent energy in growing those plants, and then they just die because you made one mistake. I would recommend you don't give up. Don't give up on it, because I mean, if I would have given up, I wouldn't be, where I am, farming, gardening. But you learn a lot. Farming, gardening, we'll just say gardening is all about mistakes. So here's the deal. The more mistakes you have, the better gardener you're going to be. Because it's not like, I wish it was. I wish my great-grandfather and great-grandmother would have taught their children how to garden, and their children how to garden, and their children how to garden. And then I learned how to garden from my mom and dad, who are fourth-generation gardeners who have been growing their own produce. That's just not the case anymore. We're in 21st century America, most of the developed world. We're not farming. We're not growing our own produce. And so you've kind of got to learn it secondhand. And if you go to a college and try to learn it, go to, say, an agronomy school, well, you're not going to learn how to organically grow your vegetables. You're going to learn how to conventionally grow corn, soybean, unless you're in a specialized program. So even our professionals in the field aren't necessarily adept or inept at growing fruits and vegetables organically and in a safe manner in a home scale. Now, there are great people out there like J.M. Fortier, Urbis, the Curtis Stone, the urban farmer, a lot of great people out there, Elliot Coleman, that are growing, Connor Crickmore at Neversink Farm, but a lot of people that are growing organically, that are growing using practices that can be adapted to the home scale, to the home gardener. So those are awesome. Let's see here. Kaylee, best tip for staying whole food plant-based, no oil. I've been vegan for 2.5 years, just have a hard time staying oil-free. All right, Kaylee, here is the tip. Don't have oil in the house. That's my biggest thing. Because here is how I so that's kind of a silly answer. But the real answer is you've kind of got to learn how to do it. But sauteing without oil, very easy to do. You just use veggie broth or use some water in the pan. You can saute pretty much everything. If you want to bake oil-free, you can use things like applesauce or date paste, or there's a lot of different things you can use in baking. Now talk about roasting or in the oven, like vegetables, where you would normally lay some vegetables out on a pan and dollop olive oil all over it, just olive oil everywhere. You use something like parchment paper or a silicone baking mat. Those things do not stick, and you can completely bake you can bake anything that you would normally not use oil to keep it from sticking, and use that. There are a few things that you are going to need something like a specialized pan if you really, really, really want to make it. Those things are like pancakes. Pancakes, you can't put some water down in a pan and just expect it to not stick and do that. You're going to need you're going to need a good nonstick pan, which is a good investment if you're dedicating yourself to eating oil-free. And so those are just simple tips. You can look at a lot of different my recipes. You can look at Forks Over Knives recipes and really find out, or you just Google in, how do I bake oil-free? How do I saute oil-free? It's very simple once you get the hang of it, and you realize it's really easy too, and you don't get this like oily feeling in your mouth. And once you cut that oil out, you'll really know. If you go out to a restaurant and order a vegan meal, you'll know how much oil they use, because right now, or getting started, you don't really recognize the amount of just extra fat they throw on things. And then we'll talk. So yeah, you learn how to do it. Kaylee, you learn how to do it. But then once you learn how to do it, you've really, this was the silly answer, but it's the true answer. You've got to throw it out. You got to get rid of the oil. You can't have it in your house, because if you have it in your house, you will find that it is, you might want some vegetables, some roasted vegetables or sauteed vegetables. And instead of thinking, oh, I know I want to be oil-free, I'm going to go oil-free. And then you look into the pantry and you see, well, I've got oil right there. I could just throw it in the pan, or I could go open up a container of veggie broth get some water, and it becomes an option. And then if it becomes an option, you're going to potentially use that option, and you might use that option a lot, which is counterproductive to what you want. And then things like, also if you're just now learning how to cook or bake oil-free, it is very it's very easy to say it's kind of a hassle to worry about using applesauce, or I'm going to use date paste, or use a flax egg in there. It's just easier to follow a recipe that says oil in it if you have it in the house. But if you cut it out, you don't have any oil in the house, you have any oil, you don't go to the neighbor and ask for oil. You just cut it out. You learn pretty quickly how to cook and bake and broil and roast things without it. So that is my big tip. I hope that helps. You figure out how to do it, which is pretty simple. If you have any further questions, you make sure to ask them. You can ask them here, or you can ask them personally through a message. But then you also just got to cut it out, because if it's around, you'll use it. I have found that to be the case with higher fat or processed vegan foods. If it is around, I will eat it, and I will eat it very quickly in a very unhealthy manner. And so I don't keep it in the house. I hope that helps. Colleen, date paste is a substitute for applesauce in baking. So Colleen, I have used it in the past, and you can use it. It adds quite a bit of sweetness, so you might not want to use it as the complete substitute for the applesauce, but I have used date paste in the past. Yes. My video is interrupted again. Let's see here. All right. Facebook is down for the count. Bruce, that oily feeling is dramatic when you cut it out. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Facebook, I think Facebook is done for the day. Something is happening. Oh, are we live on Facebook? Can you? I don't know. Can you see me on Facebook? But we're here on YouTube. So if you're on Facebook, head over to YouTube and we'll keep talking. But yeah, sorry about that. So we're still getting things worked out. I promise we'll get it worked out here. This is the 4th live stream. So maybe at 400 or 40 or 14, we'll have it all worked out. But yes, so live video interrupted. So yeah, so I guess let's go back to farm. Let's go back to gardening. So that second year, my plants had kind of died, but I got the watering down. So I ended up doing a lot more with the watering. It looks like we might be back on Facebook, but I got the watering down, which was really huge. And so how I did that was I used a 1/2-inch poly line, which is just poly tubing, kind of a plastic tubing, and ran that from my spigot, which was outside the house, and ran that on top of the buckets and just tapped in a 1/4-inch poly tubing, so a tiny tubing, and opened that all up and let that come through. Let's see here. We're okay. We are back on, or we are on Facebook. That is good. All right. But I took that poly tubing and I ran that into each bucket, put that in there, and then I was able to grow in that second year. By the end of the second year, I think I had 60 buckets, somewhere around there, 50, 60 buckets. I grew 40, because I grew multiple in some of the buckets because they were smaller varieties, 40 or 50 pepper plants, 20 tomato plants, herbs, potatoes, carrots, corn. I grew a little bit of everything, and that was really fun. And that really got me interested in the idea of, wow, I can grow food. I'm going to keep growing food. Let's see how much food I can grow. All right, let's see here. Carnival, 10,000 subs, 5 people watching, at least not one. This proves just how much vegans care. Yes, thank you, Carnival. Thank you for coming on. So when it turns out, Facebook or YouTube has changed quite a few algorithms, so not many people are able to jump on live streams like this, and hopefully they'll jump on. But Carnival, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope heart disease doesn't get you too quickly from all that processed food and animal foods. Not that you eat processed foods, but probably eat a lot of animal foods. And I did that 100 pounds ago. All right, nice one. I'm loving your chat. It has gotten me to forget about living in a shelter. My mother, well, nice one. I am so sorry to hear that, but I am hoping that you get back on your feet quickly and that things get rolling for you. And I'm cheering you on. I am cheering you on. Let's see here over at Facebook. What do we have? In the past, I've replaced oil with applesauce for baking cakes. Is that the main option as an oil replacement for baking? Applesauce is a great option. You can use things like a date paste, or you can use like there used to be a prune plum style of like paste that you could use, but it now is now you can. But they stopped making it. I think it was called NutraSweet. No, I don't think that's what it was called. Forget what it was called. But you can do the same thing in a food processor or your blender and blend up some prunes and use that as a as another option there to keep you. Because really the thing is, when you're baking something like a cake, the oil in it would keep it moist because it doesn't evaporate out. The moisture keeps in there. But if you're in your, let's see here, 1 second. If you're trying to, you're going oil free, you can always cut out the oil, use something like applesauce, and hopefully it contains some of that moisture. So it's a bit of a learning curve when baking, but roasting and sauteing, very easy, very quick learning curve, very quick. Barbara, for baked goods, breads, cakes, use 1 tablespoon of pumpkin puree. Yes, that is also a great option, or pume puree. Awesome. Gabriel is on YouTube now live if you can't see him here. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate you helping out with that. Yes, I am on YouTube. I am on Facebook, I think. I don't know. I've got to get that Facebook thing figured out here. But yeah, so we're talking about gardening. And now we're here on the 1 acre vegan farm, which is the mainstay of where I'm growing all my produce. And so we are getting ready to get started with a VSA, which will be a vegan supported agriculture bit of a project that I've been working on, really focused around selling salad greens and your green leafy vegetables at a good price. Now those are, we're not trying to make, we're not trying to rip people off with it. And again, it's a vegan supported agriculture. So you don't have to be vegan to do it, but we hopefully have a large enough vegan community around that is interested in vegan grown produce that would be interested in it. So that's what we're working on here on the farm. We're implementing things that are more of physical. So the question I get asked is, how do you keep bugs off your things? How do you stop the bugs? Well, for one, I don't just plant things and let them go, because you're bound to have some bug problems, especially in, say, the dead of the heat of summer, when the bugs are at their worst. And so things like brassicas, your kale, collards, broccolis, you aren't going to be able to just throw them out there and expect the bugs to stay away from them. That doesn't happen. What does happen, what you can do are some physical barriers. So we use insect netting. You can also use a low gram, which just means a really thin, a row cover. I've also used that. I also use that to cover. So we put little hoops up around, and that keeps those bugs out. Doesn't keep every single one out, but as you're harvesting, you're going to notice that the majority of your crops are fine. And especially if you're just growing for your own consumption, it's going to be more than fine on you're not going to see a bunch of little holes in there. You're going to be able to go through and get the best ones. And if you're just eating it yourself, you don't have to worry about the little imperfections in your produce. So I hope that helps on that. Yeah, we're implementing a lot of things. I just got a wood chipper, so I'm adding in. So the vegan compost is really the big thing that we're doing on the farm with the gardening, is adding a lot of vegan compost to our beds, and that's what we're using to fertilize and amend our soil. So how do I make that vegan compost? It's a mixture of a few things, but the base of it is things like garden scraps. So leaves, plants that have bolted or have gone to seed. We've also got grass clippings. So those are the big greens that we put in. We will put in wood chips as a good carbon source. Again, the nitrogen sources, the greens. So the garden scraps and the kitchen scraps or the grass clippings, all great forms of nitrogen, to get those protein in the ground, really the nitrogen. And then we'll add in things like some cardboard if we have some cardboard around. And we also compost in a couple different ways. So we have a large compost pile that will really heat up, but that's more of a long term. It takes 6 months or so for that to become ready. We also have some bins that we have there with more so if we have garden scraps that are continually coming out that we'll put into those bins that have holes in them. So if worms want to come up, microbes are in there and they can go ahead and take care of those garden scraps. But the key is with that is it's contained. And so we don't have to worry about squirrels coming in, raccoons, possums coming in and breaking and opening up the compost pile and taking all of our good garden scraps, which is a problem if you don't have your compost pile hot enough or if you want to continually add in those inputs. So we use it's very close to a vermicomposter, but we're not bringing in any exogenous or outside forms of worms. We're just any ambient worms that we would have in our soil are able to come up into those boxes, take what they'd like, go back down. But that's a good way for us to just continually take care of those garden scraps. And that is really what we use to amend our soil. We're able to, for one, create enough garden scraps, but also grass clippings. I use cover crops on the farm and wood chips. So I just got my wood chipper, so I'm able to chip up some wood. If I see the neighbor's got some limbs he needs cut down or wants me to take care of, I'll put those in there. And then you also have things like bamboo. We have a lot of bamboo around here, which I've started to add into the compost, which is a great carbon source. And if you get green with with some green leaves on there, you've got some other sources in there that are as well very good to have in your amendment and your fertilizers. So that's really what's going on the farm. If anybody has any questions, I'll be sure to answer them. But we've got a hockey game getting ready to start here pretty soon, and we've had quite a bit of trouble with Facebook. I do apologize about that. If you were on Facebook, we're going to get this fixed, and we'll make it a little bit easier to use. But if you're here on YouTube, thank you for joining. I am Plant-Based Gabriel, and let me know. Why don't you send out and see what would be a good topic for, say, next week's live stream. Want to make sure we're answering your questions and figuring out what you guys like to talk about. So for today, I am Plant-Based Gabriel. Had a bit of errors in today's live stream, but hey, that's why we do it. The more mistakes we have, the better we'll get at it. If you haven't heard it already, thank you for joining. I love you. Plant-Based Gabriel here. I'm going to sign out, and you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great week coming up here, and we'll see you in some videos and some pictures on the interwebs. Bye.